Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Earth 2 podcast, your weekly exploration of the DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters to the Silver and the Bronze Ages of comics. I'm Peter Watson and I'm feeling very tired.
And I'm David Steele and I've just woken up. Welcome back, thank you for joining us. Yes, that torturous wordplay tells you that this week we're reading issue 5 of the 70s DC Sandman series, published on the 31st of July 1975, just a few weeks after Ringo Starr's 35th birthday, and literally 3 weeks after the first birthday of Simon from Menswear. Aww.
Happy birthday, guys.
Happy birthday, guys, if you're listening. If you can stay awake long enough, Peter will tell us about the cover of issue 5.
At the top, on the cigar band, as we're calling it, we have a picture of the Sandman, and it's the same picture of him looking a bit perplexed that we had in the previous issue's cover, which is hilarious, with a very small The Sandman logo, the line of DC superstars, and a minor roll call for some of the people appearing in this issue. We have Jed, looking incredibly like Commandy, we have Brute, looking incredibly like Bernard Bresslaw, and we have Glob, looking incredibly like a prune.
Yeah,
so
Glob looking like a mad ball or a mouldy potato or something.
Remember those squishy things you got in the 80s you put your fingers in and made talk?
Yes.
Is it one of those?
Listeners, what do you think Glob looks like? Write in and let us know.
The Sandman, Master of Nightmares, is the heading at the top. And the main cover on the image, we have Jed in bed. And appearing through a mist, is this a dream? Is a woman. She is in danger. She's been kidnapped by some hideous, really, really hideous frogmen. And I don't mean guys in wetsuits. I mean men who are frogs. And one of them is brandishing a kind of a ray gun type pistol. And the woman has a strange headdress on. She seems to have some sort of, it's almost like Romanesque robes on. But she is gagged and she looks very distressed as she's being led away by these frogmen. But luckily, bursting into the room looking hella dynamic is the Sandman.
The weird blue guys, as I would just describe them myself, they're sort of surrounded in a cloud. We should mention that Jed has got a hold of her right wrist as if he's trying to stop her from being carried away, and it highlights, I suppose, the slight unreal quality of a lot of the stories, you know, how much is real, how much is all a dream, etc. It's very interesting, and you're right, the Sandman looks great. Why have we not done an action figure of that version of the Sandman yet? That's what I want to know.
And the Sandman should look great, because this cover, according to the big button in the bottom, is by Jack Kirby.
Provides interiors as well. Story written this week by Michael Fleischer. Jack Kirby assisted by Mike Royer, editor Joe Orlando. So jumping into the story properly, we see the Sandman logo carved out the rock, emerging out of the sea, and we read, the Sandman in
The Invasion of the Frogmen.
And we're straight into things. We see Jed and his granddad on a boat in the middle of a stormy, boiling sea. And to me, what looks like either a golden Fing Fang Foom or that beastie from the one of the Jack Kirby Guardian and Newsboy stories a couple of years ago is coming out of the water at Jed and his granddad. Wide mouth, large green eyes. Jed's granddad is yelling, "Holy Hannah! Abandon ship, boy, and swim for your life!"
No, Grandpa, I won't leave you.
Top of page 2, we're into the story properly, and we're going back a little bit. It doesn't take us long to get to the splash page. The splash page is a hint of what's to come, but it's a calmer-looking sea, a calm sky, a few birds in the air, and Jed and his granddad are out in a fishing boat. Long-distance shot of the boat, and we hear their voices.
Why are we heading over that way, Grandpa? Yesterday the fish were biting like crazy right where we are now.
That was yesterday, Jed. We cut to inside the boat. Granddad's at the wheel with his pipe in his mouth. They're all wearing their waterproof jackets and hats. Very sensible. Grandad continues, "Today, the big ones will be biting over in that cove."
How do you know that, Grandpa?
"See those birds, Jed?" And he points. "They're scavengers. They feed on the remains of the little fish that the big fellas down below are catching and eating for dinner."
They do?
"That's right. So whenever you see all those birds congregated in one spot like that, diving and swooping, you can bet that the fat granddaddy fish are down below, having themselves a regular banquet. And you see seagulls hovering over the water and dipping in and filling their boots, as my friend Gary Smith used to say. You can see the boat in the background. And in the next panel, Grandad gives Jed an instruction, saying, "Go ahead, cast your net like I've showed you, and see for yourself."
"Okay, Grandpa,"
says Jed, hurling his net into the sea.
"Golly, Grandpa, you were right. Why, I bet you know everything about the sea."
says Jed as he pulls his net, which is full of fish, back onto the boat. Grandad laughs, saying, "Ha! No one knows everything about the sea, Jed, but after... Holy Hannah!" And the caption at the top of page 3 reads,
A churning sea, a thunderous roar, and a peaceful scene suddenly turns to nightmare.
And this is probably the part where the splash image fitted into the narrative, because with a massive crash, the mammoth, coiling gold sea serpent's tail clips the boat, shattering it, and sending Jed and Grandad into the water. Grandad yells, "Ah!" as the creature seems to be swimming towards him with its mouth open. Jed yells,
Grandpa, no, no! But at that very instant, in the Sandman's dream dome...
Very helpfully, the Sandman is watching proceedings on one of his screens. He yells, "Holy smokes! That's Jed and his grandpa! They're in trouble! I've got to do something!" And a voice from off-camera says, "Relax, Sandman." And then we see that this voice belongs to Brute, who's in his little glass canister with his name on it, and he continues, "Don't you ever take a day off from trouble?" "Quiet, Brute. I've got to try to do something to help them, even though I may already be too late." And then we see Sandman launching himself into the reality ejector tube as Glob stands nearby with his hands against the glass of his container, and he says,
"Thanks for leaving the monitor on, Sandman. That way Bruce and me will be able to watch the action."
With the speed of thought, the Sandman is catapulted into the world of reality.
Yep, and we see Jed's POV as he's in the sea, and the Sandman dropping into view, and Jed cries,
"Sandman, thank heavens!"
The Sandman hurls himself upon the hideous sea beast, only to find himself ensnarled in one of its gruesome tentacles.
Yes, this one we see it's not really just a sea serpent, it has tentacles growing off it as well, and it manages to wrap the Sandman up, and we see its open maw yawning towards him. The Sandman thinks, "Ah, my hands, pinned to my sides. No way it can reach my sand capsules, but at least Jed ought to have made it to shore by now."
And then, suddenly, the gargantuan monster descends, dragging both Jed's grandfather and the Sandman beneath the swirling, angry depths.
Yes, we see the giant serpent with the tentacles swimming underwater. Poor Grandad coiled up in one of its appendages. Sandman thinking, "Running out of air. Got to get free."
Finally, with an effort born of desperation, the Sandman breaks the slimy stranglehold.
"I'm loose. Now, if I can only save Jed's grandpa." And then with a pow, and what looks like a release of energy, the Sandman strikes the sea serpent, which uncoils its tentacle and releases Grandad into the sea. Sandman thinks, I've heard it. It's let go, and it's running off. Or maybe swimming off might be a more appropriate way. And Sandman has grabbed Grandad under the arm and is swimming up to the surface, thinking, "Now, if only I'm not too late to save him."
Cradling the limp form of Jed's grandpa, the Sandman churns through the boiling surf with powerful strokes.
Yeah, and there's a great Kirby panel showing the tumultuous turning waves as the Sandman swims towards the shore.
And then, on the shore, labours desperately to return the old man to consciousness.
Yes, we see Grandad stretched out on his back, Jed kneeling beside him, Sandman kneeling over him. Jed says,
He'll be all right, won't he, Sandman? Won't he?"
I'm afraid not, Jed. I guess this is one time I just came too late."
You mean he's...
"I'm afraid so, Jed. Your grandfather's dead."
What am I going to do now, Sandman? He was the best grandpa any kid ever had."
Sandman stands up, hugs Jed to comfort him, saying, "I know that, Jed, but now, somehow, you'll have to learn to get on without him."
Soon atop a high grassy knoll at one end of Dolphin Island,
Jed and Sandman stand, looking very, very moody. Deep shadows cast over Jed's face, very effective, as Jed says,
This was his favourite spot, Sandman. He used to sit up here for hours and smoke his pipe and tell me stories and...
Poor Jed breaks down crying. Sandman puts a hand on his shoulder, saying, "Easy, Jed. Try to be brave. It's what your grandfather would have wanted."
I will, Sandman."
"That's a boy, Jed. You're a brave lad," says Sandman, both hands on Jed's shoulders to reassure him. "Now, listen to me, Jed. I must go now, but I want you to take this whistle and carry it with you always." And Sandman hands the whistle to Jed, a little small golden one, like the one we've seen in previous issues, as Jed says,
All right, Sandman, but what is it? Why?
"It's a special whistle, Jed, just like the one I carry. If you ever need my help, just blow it at once, loud and clear."
Don't worry, Sandman. I will. And thanks. Thanks for everything.
And there's a slow dissolve.
The days pass slowly for young Jed, living all alone on Dolphin Island. And then, one afternoon...
Yes, we see Jed on the beach, seems to be digging, and a very unusually designed small yacht-type boat effort is pulling up towards him. It's being steered by a figure who we don't properly see at this point, we just see him in silhouette, but standing in the bows of the small vessel is a kind of older-looking dark-haired woman in white trousers and a vividly patterned red shirt. She's a white scarf over her dark hair. Jed looks up, sees them, and exclaims,
Huh?
and the woman exclaims, Jed boy, is that you?
Aunt Clarice? What are you and Uncle Barnaby doing way out here?
And we see that Aunt Clarice and Uncle Barnaby, because it's Uncle Barnaby that was at the wheel of the boat, have parked up at a little jetty and they're walking down towards them. Aunt Clarice replies, Why, we've come to see you, Jed. Can't an aunt pay a visit to her very favourite nephew?
Sure, Aunt Clarice, it's just you've never took the time out to visit me before.
Oh, nonsense, Jed. Say, I don't see your grandfather around. Is he still frittering his life away trying to catch those smelly...
Grandpa's dead, Aunt Clarice.
I was always amazed how your grandfather could stand to... Huh? What was that you said, Jed, dearest?
Grandpa got killed fighting a sea monster.
Aunt Teresa, we must say, has a very craggy face. She kind of reminds me of Doc Cotton from EastEnders.
Mm-hmm.
That's a reference for Ross and Steve and our American pals.
She reminds me of Bernadette of the Female Furies.
I can see that. I can see that very much. Maybe they're played by the same actress.
Could be.
Maybe she's the whatever continuity, continuum, dimensions equivalent of what's-her-face from the Female Furies. But Aunt Teresa leans forward to gonna give Jed sort of a mildly consoling hug as she says, Oh, you poor boy. Did you hear that, Barnaby? Jed's all alone in the world now. Isn't it a lucky thing we happened along for a visit?
Sure is,
says Barnaby, who we see more clearly in the next panel. He's a very Jack Kirby-type looking face, thick-set man wearing a sailor's cap. Jed exclaims,
Well, what do you mean, lucky?
Well, your uncle and I have been feeling just terrible about our favourite nephew living all alone with a good-for-nothing old man on some tiny island.
My grandpa wasn't a good-for-nothing. He was good and kind and...
Jed is making his way back towards the small cabin that he lived in. At this point, Clarice and Barnaby following, Clarice saying, My goodness, Jed, mind your temper, boy. We didn't mean to say anything unkind about your grandpa, did we, Barnaby?
Of course not.
We just feel that a boy your age should have friends his own age to play with and a nice, healthy environment to grow up in.
I'm going to grow up here on Dolphin Island. Grandpa liked it, and so do I.
Oh, nonsense. You can't continue to live here all alone. Your uncle and I have a beautiful farm on the mainland and 2 lovely children about your age.
You do?
Of course we do. The farm's got fruit trees and vegetables and animals. Why, it would be just like growing up in the Garden of Eden. And at this point, Uncle Barnaby leans in and whispers to Clarice, saying,
Honestly, Clarice, do you have to lay it on so thick?
Next panel was amazing. Barnaby starts to walk away. We see he's got a cigarette lighter in his hand and he's using it to reignite the cigar that he's been puffing on. And a seagull looks as if it's about to drop something in his hat, quite amusingly. We see in this panel just how ramshackle the cabin that they lived in really is. And Jed sort of standing with his hands behind his back, looking up at Clarice, and he says,
Could I play with the animals if I lived in the farm?
Why, certainly you could, dear. We then see Uncle Barnaby puffing a cracking smoke ring as he says,
Yeah, and you could work in the orchards too.
Oh, Barnaby, shut up. Can't you see the boy's in no mood for your stupid jokes? She turns to Jed and says, Well, Jed, what do you say?
All right, Aunt Clarice, I'll come. Just let me have some time to pack my things.
And before our slow dissolve, I'll quickly tell you that the opposite page is a full bleed advertisement for some of DC's giant books at this point. Batman Family Issue 1, Super Team Family Issue 1, Tarzan Family, picking up the numbering of Korak, son of Tarzan, and also mentioned Superman Family. It'll be a little while before we return to Superman Family, but there will be a story from Super Team Family before too long, and we'll also be doing a story from, I think, issue 6 of Batman Family, so get you to eBay in advance.
Yes.
So yes, a slow dissolve, and a caption reads,
And so, a short while later...
Yes, we see Uncle Barnaby's fancy boat scurrying across the ocean, with Aunt Clarice and Jed sat at the back looking out at the view, and Clarice saying, Well, here we go, off to a life of fun and adventure. It'll be just wonderful having another child in the farm, won't it, Barnaby?
Yeah, terrific.
And a sad-looking Jed in his jacket and warm cap thinks,
Goodbye, Grandpa. Goodbye, Dolphin Islands.
Petesy, I don't know about you, man. This is breaking my heart.
I know. I was nearly tearing up reading this earlier on, by the way. I know.
This is devastating. Okay, we have another slow dissolve.
And soon...
Uncle Barnaby, taking off his sailor's cap, we see that he's got a comb over. What a fool. He says,
Here we are, Jed. Your new home.
and we see his new home. Big white house, up a drive. We can see lots of trees, a fence in front. Aunt Clarice gestures towards a very thick-set-looking teenage boy with dark hair and the sort of t-shirt I would wear. And beside him, leaning on a post, is a dark-haired girl, very severe-looking features, like her mum. And Aunt Clarice is saying, and these are your darling little cousins, Susan and Bruce. They'll be just like having a brother and sister of your very own.
Hi, Susan. Hi, Bruce.
And they get close-ups in the first panel of page 10. Very brutish. I wonder if Barnaby and Clarice are brother and sister. Bruce says,
He looks like a real sissy to me.
and look how skinny he is, says Susan. They're chided by their mum, who says, Hush, children. That's no way to talk to our new guest. Come along, Jed.
Moments later...
They're inside the house. Clarice is showing Jed to his new spot, his new place, as she says, This is your room, Jed. Isn't it a beauty?
It's beautiful, Aunt Clarice.
And, we see a ramshackle bed and there's a table and a big chair, a couple of windows. It doesn't look too bad, to be honest, but Aunt Clarice says, Well, you certainly don't sound very grateful, young man. This room is far preferable to living in some fisherman's shack, I assure you.
I'm sorry, Aunt Clarice. I really like it, honest.
They're making their way downstairs in the next panel as Clarice is saying, That's better. Now come on. It's time for dinner. You must be famished after that long trip.
Wow, I sure am.
But...
Yes, well, dear me. We've made comments in the past, haven't we, about Jed and social services and such things. And
Yes.
I think I'm going to be getting on the phone to them after this comic, because we see Jed's new family getting stuck in, knives and forks a go-go and plates heaped high with vegetables and all sorts of stuff, as Aunt Clarice is saying, I'm sorry we didn't have enough lamb chops and vegetables to go round, Jed. How was your oatmeal? Tasty? And we see Jed with a small bowl of obviously just gruel in front of him, stirring it with a spoon, and he says,
Delicious, Aunt Clarice. Just delicious.
We're continued in the 5th page following. Adverts include the Abracadabra Magic Shop and a couple more DC tabloids, Secret Origins of Supervillains and a Superman one with Statue of Liberty on the cover. That's pretty cool. And then another full-page advert for DC tabloids. What do we see there? Christmas with the Superheroes, How Seasonal, Shazam, Sensation Comics, The Bible, Ghosts, etc. We arrive at the top of page 11, and a caption reads,
In the days that follow, Jed is introduced to more of the harsh realities of life on his aunt and uncle's farm.
It's obviously a nice day. Uncle Barnaby's lying against a tree, the big hat on, a bottle of something in his left hand, and he's munching on a sandwich by the looks of things. And we see Susan lying on the grass, munching on a nice lolly, and perched on a small wooden box is Bruce, who seems to be wearing a shirt very like Charlie Brown's, just from the way this is sort of rendered. And he's drinking from something, and Jed is doing a Huckleberry Finn cosplay. He's wearing dungarees and a striped shirt, and he's got a big straw hat on, and he's on his knees, picking at the stuff that's growing, and he looks back at the family, and he says,
Can I stop for a few minutes rest now, Uncle Barnaby? Please?
Not until you picked another 2 bushels, Jed. On a farm, everybody has to pick their quota before resting.
But I've already picked lots more than either Bruce or Susie.
Jed, how can you talk that way? Susie's only a girl, and you heard Bruce say how badly he sprained his ankle today.
says Uncle Barnaby, pointing at Jed, and Jed's face is shrouded by the brim of his hat, but he obviously isn't very happy.
And then, one afternoon...
Jed is using a pitchfork to pile up some straw and some hay, and Bruce is standing with some sort of bucket in front of him and a ladle, and he's sipping out and drinking whatever it is that's in the bucket, but he's noticed something, and he says,
Hey, Jed, what you wearing around your neck? Can I see it? It's nothing, Bruce, just an old... Why, it looks like a whistle. A neat one. I want it.
and Bruce reaches forward, grabbing the whistle around Jed's neck.
Leave it alone, Bruce.
And Bruce tugs on it further.
You're selfish. It's not fair for you to have a shiny whistle like that while I haven't got any. Now look, Bruce, you let go. If you're not going to let me have it, I'm going to take it.
Bruce pulls at the whistle, and with a snap, the cord that was holding it around Jed's neck breaks. Jed exclaims,
What?
And then we see Bruce holding the whistle up and he says,
There. Now I've got the whistle, and I'm not going to give it back, ever. Give me back my whistle, Bruce.
and then Bruce taunts Jed by waving the whistle around in front of him, saying,
What you gonna do about it if I don't squirt? Eh, sissy?
we see that Jed is looking very angry, and then he reaches forward and with a
Pow!
punches Bruce in the stomach. Quite right, Jed. Aunt Clarice appears in the scene, saying, My word! What in heaven's name is going on around here? And we see that Bruce, like all bullies, has suddenly decided that he's the victim. He's sat on the ground, looks like he's pretending to cry, and he says,
I just asked Jed if I could blow his whistle just once, and he hit me for no reason.
Aunt Clarice grabs Jed by the scruff of his collar, starts walking him off, and they're followed by a couple of pigs that live on the farm. And we see Bruce looking kind of smug to my eyes as they walk off. Clarice is saying, Jed, how dare you? You know how I abhor senseless violence. Now you come along with me. I've got just the thing to tame an ill temper like yours.
But Aunt Clarice.
And there's a quick, slow dissolve, if there is such a thing.
Quick, slow dissolve.
Yes. Quick, slow dissolve, of course, supported the Montrose Avenue in their final tour in 1998. We arrive at the top of page 13 for another caption.
Moments later.
And Aunt Clarice, very helpfully, points and says, See that wood pile? I want to see every log in that pile chopped into firewood before dinner time, or you can go to bed without your dinner. And indeed, we see, obviously bits of broken fence post and tree trunks and branches and all sorts of stuff. And there's an axe and a tree stump in front of him, as Jed says,
But Aunt Clarice, that pile's huge. No one could possibly.
You should have thought of that before you punched Bruce, Jed. Now get to work. And don't you dare stop until every bit of that wood is chopped into kindling. Listeners, I want to point out we're nearly halfway through page 13 of an 18-page story. I don't know about you, but I'm sort of wondering, where's the frogmen? Anyway, Jed gets a close-up as he looks very sad and thinks,
Just look at this pile of wood. It's like a mountain. Nobody could chop it all before dinner time. Nobody.
Very defeatist attitude from Jed in the next panel. He's sat down, leaning against the wood pile, puts his hat on his legs and thinks,
I might as well forget about dinner and just take a little nap. I sure am tired from all the work they've been making me do.
Weakened from the lack of nutritious meals and fatigued to the point of exhaustion by the arduous farm labour, little Jed falls fast asleep.
Great shot, Jed, asleep against the wood pile with the axe in the foreground. Is this a case of Chekhov's axe? Stay tuned.
But suddenly...
Jed is roused. We hear a voice saying, Wake up, Jed! Wake up! We have important work to do.
Huh? Who said that?
What's the matter, Jed? Have you forgotten who I am already? And we see as Jed wakes up, standing over him, it's our old pal.
Gosh, the Sandman! But how did you know I was here? How?
There's very little that's secret from me, Jed, but come on now. We have a vital mission to perform and time is running out.
We do? I mean, it is.
And we see the Sandman blowing on his whistle.
A single puff on the magic whistle sends Jed and the Sandman whirling through space in a burst of blazing starlight, until, finally...
Yes, we see the Sandman and Jed arrive in a great cosmic-looking landscape. We can see burning stars and Kirby dots in space behind them. Sandman seems to be skating along with Jed in his wake. Weird sort of mushroom-like growths on the ground below them. Other weird shapes coiling up into the sky. Jed exclaims,
Gosh, where are we?
and we see that they're being met by a fairy-type girl. She's wearing a blue tunic and has sort of gossamer yellow wings buzzing on her head and a weird sort of headband which looks like it's maybe made out of flowers. We can see behind her is another sort of winged character. But this girl greets them both and says,
Sandman, thank heavens you've come. The frogmen are attacking in force this time. I don't think we can hold them alone.
That's just why we've come. Right, Jed?
If you say so, Sandman, but...
And at this point we see Sandman and Jed now down on the ground. They're running across some grass. And in the final panel of page 14, the girl who met them points and says,
Look, here they come.
and we see the frogmen finally. Now, they look incredibly Jack Kirby, it must be said. Frog faces, but they're quite distorted. They're wearing armour. One has a sort of large blue collar around his head. Two of them have yellow helmets with arrowheads on the top. One's carrying a red axe. Jed exclaims,
Are we going to fight them?
Buck up, Jed, and remember, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Within moments, the tiny island kingdom of the peace-loving winged people is embroiled in mortal combat with the forces of the vicious frogmen.
Yes, this panel will definitely make it onto the socials. We see the Sandman and Jed and some of the locals battling with the frogmen. There's a sock sound effect as the Sandman punches one of the frogs out. We can see a winged chap in the background who reminds me of that guy in Crisis, who I don't really know his name of. He's got kind of dark hair and he wears kind of Greco armour and his wings. And every time I see him, I think he's a Titans character.
Oh, yes.
I don't know who he is. Do you know who I mean?
Asriel, Oriel, something like that.
We can see this guy in the background flying overhead and striking a couple of frogmen. And in the foreground, there's one wide-eyed frogman with an axe battling someone with dark hair, the red headband, and a sword and wings. And we see a couple other winged folk in the background. It's all kicking off, basically. Big fight.
But just as the Sandman and his friends seem to be gaining the upper hand at last,
proceedings are interrupted by the Frog King, or King Frog, whatever you want to call him. He is wearing sort of red armour, but over that has a blue robe lined with yellow fur. The collar and the sleeves are lined with yellow fur. He's wide-eyed, wide-mouthed, wears a crown. There is a touch of the Nigel Farage, it must be said, and he stands with his hands wide open and yells, "Wait! Stop the fighting!" And he points, and we see that one of the other frogmen is holding the lady Peter described in the cover. The woman wearing sort of gold armour with the weird headdress and the gold cape and the golden gloves. And the Frog King continues saying, "As you can see, your precious queen has become our prisoner. Raise a hand against us, and she dies." And the queen exclaims, "We're taking her back with us to our undersea city. But don't worry, we'll be back soon enough to collect our ransom money." And we see one of the frogs carrying off the queen. Sandman and Jed are standing as one of the winged warriors floats in behind them, saying,
"You've got to get our queen back for us, Sandman. You've just got to."
And Jed says,
"Why don't we just invade their undersea city, Sandman, and get her back?" "It's not going to be quite as easy as that, young friend. You see, no one knows exactly where the secret undersea city is, and it would take months to search the miles of open water around this island."
And at this point we get a nice aerial shot of the place where they're standing. We can see a very Kirby-like structure. They're standing on a grassy beach-type area with a boiling sea around, weird growths coming out of the sea, a couple more winged warriors floating overhead and standing there. And Sandman says, "Still, we've got to try. Come on, Jed."
but after hours of futile searching...
Great panel of the Sandman and Jed flying very low over the surface of the ocean. Sandman saying, "I'm afraid it's no use, Jed. We've..."
"Wait, look! What are all those birds doing over there?"
Jed looks to his left and sees lots of seagull-like sized creatures hovering above the surface of the water. They start to fly towards them as Sandman says, "I don't get it, Jed. Are the birds important?" "Of course they're important. They introduced the folk rock sound and popularised the 12-string Rickenbacker guitar. Would we have the Montrose Avenue without the birds? Or not those? All right, not that sort of birds. Sorry." Jed replies,
"They are if you're a fisherman, Sandman. Those birds might just be feeding on the remains of little fish eaten by much bigger fish, or..."
"I understand now, Jed. They might be diving for the food scraps floating to the surface from the frogmen's undersea city. Come on, let's have a look." And then with a
splash,
they dive under the surface of the ocean. And we see the Sandman and Jed swimming down to an ornate, fancy Jack Kirby design of an undersea building. As they draw nearer, the Sandman thinks, Jed was right. There it is.
With mighty sledgehammer blows, the Sandman smashes his way through the outer wall of the undersea city.
Yes, there's a fantastic sound effect as the Sandman hammers the wall, shattering it.
And with Jed by his side, fights his way down labyrinthine corridors.
Yes, we see a Sandman knocking over another frogman with a
pow!
As the frogman exclaims, "Urgh!" And we see Jed getting stuck in as he knocks out another one, saying,
"Take that, fish face! Frog face!"
Until, finally...
Definitely feels like we've lost a couple of pages of brilliant quality Jack Kirby-style frog fighting, but not to worry. Maybe when Peter and I write our own DC comic, we'll have a flashback to this sequence. They've arrived in a large, wide room. We can see the queen of the sort of flying insect people sat on a dais, arms secured and her legs secured by ropes. And Jed and Sandman arrive, still giving it loud, and knocking out frogmen as Sandman is saying, "Don't worry, your majesty. They'll have you back home again in 2 shakes of a comet's tail. Won't we, Jed?"
"You bet, Sandman."
As Jed strikes another frogman, sending his axe flying.
And before long...
Yes, we're back at the idyllic place where the winged people all live. Large crowd of happy subjects. As the queen is obviously back on her throne, we see Jed and Sandman being borne along in some kind of little golden bar structure, being held up by a couple of the flying people. As the queen addresses everyone saying,
"We will all be eternally grateful for what you two have done. Now that the frogmen know we can attack their city in retaliation, they won't dare attack us again."
and a smiling Sandman says, "We were glad to help out, Your Highness. Weren't we, Jed?" First panel of page 18, we can see the celebrating crowds. The Sandman looks to his companion and says, "Hey, Jed, you're not going to fall asleep in the middle of this procession, are you? Wake up, Jed. Wake up." And then we cut back to Jed, lying against the woodpile. His shoulder is being shaken, and a voice says, "Wake up, Jed. Wake up."
Where am I?
Says Jed as he comes to, and Aunt Clarice is saying, "You're asleep on the job, young man. That's where you are." Jed grabs his hat and stands up, saying,
Oh, gosh, Aunt Clarice. I didn't mean to fall asleep, honest. It's just that
and he breaks off because Aunt Clarice has got a hand up to her face and she says in surprise, "My word, Jed, how did you manage to do all that?" Jed spins his head round, saying,
What?
and we see that the massive pile of broken branches and timber has gone. Aunt Clarice says, "I take back everything I said, Jed. You certainly are a dedicated worker." And Jed looks around in surprise and has a little speech bubble with an exclamation mark and a question mark.
Huh?
And Aunt Clarice continues, saying, "Still, there was so much wood there, Jed. How on earth did you ever manage to cut it all?" And as proceedings conclude, we see all the wood that's been chopped and cut and broken down into logs, all laid out and stacked precisely and neatly, and hiding behind this pile of wood, holding an axe, we see Brute, and Glob is with him too. And as they listen to all that's going on, Brute laughs quietly to himself. And Glob laughs quietly to himself. And a caption reads, "End." That was brilliant, wasn't it?
Why did this series not run for 60 issues? Why? Why? Oh,
know.
seriously. Remember back when we were first considering this, we thought, we'll do Sandman #1, and then we'll just wrap up, and then we'll talk about the rest, because we both thought these are going to be clunkers of stories.
Yes.
Neither of us had read them in years and years and years, and see, revisiting these, I'm so glad we're doing every single one. It's amazing. The amount of time it takes for any action to happen in this, obviously apart from the sea serpents,
Yes.
which, is bizarre.
Yeah, and gets no explanation. Yeah.
The tragedy of losing Jed's grandfather is horrible, and you really feel it in this. But it's almost as if in the previous issues they're trying to set something up with him, but they never really followed through. Remember, like the Sinister panel in the last issue?
I remember that quite clearly when it seemed to be sort of hinting that maybe everything wasn't quite right with Grandad, or he certainly seemed preoccupied with something.
Yeah, but obviously they've abandoned that idea. And to be honest, if they're going to have Jed, we've had one issue that didn't have Jed in it, and it was not quite as exciting, let's be honest. But going back to Jed, just having him and his grandfather, it's quite limiting as to what you can do there. But this has massively expanded the cast, and I'm just wondering if J.K. Rowling might have read this story when she was young.
Of course.
It's very, very, very Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Or from being taken in by an abusive auntie and uncle.
Yeah, that's quite a familiar trope. I'm sure it's been done elsewhere outside of Potter, but you're right. I was wondering what that was consciously reminding me of, and that's absolutely what it is. It's heartbreaking that Grandad sort of goes in this way. Mm-hmm. We've talked before how there seems to be a sort of link between Sandman and Jed. We're not exactly sure why Sandman pays so much attention to him, but Sandman does seem to be monitoring him at all times.
Yeah, definitely.
Is the plan that Jed will be the next Sandman or something? I don't know. Reading it again today in prep, it could have been like issue 16 or 17 or 23 or 24 of the 80s, 90s Neil Gaiman authored Sandman.
Yeah.
Remember the way that we were introduced to sort of Rose or some of the other people? It felt like, this could have been the introduction for a character that's going to be involved in Morpheus's world. And it reminded me that the first time I was reading these stories was when the first summer that I was reading the Morpheus Sandman series, which was, summer 94. And I was reading all these stories run about roughly the same time. Yeah. So, our friend Alec, hi Alec, if you're listening, has mentioned to us a couple of times about how these characters that we're reading about in the Kirby series were used in the later book. So it's been interesting reading them again, separate from, because I was reading them originally around the time I was first reading the stories that dealt with spoilers, Hector and Brute and Glob and all that sort of stuff. So it's good now to read them separately and sort of go, did Gaiman read this, and was this something else that he sort of cribbed from and kind of like, took inspiration from, I'll say tactfully. It's fascinating reading this one because it really works very well as a standalone story almost. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it doesn't, because it is completely rooted in everything that's been established about Sandman and Jed's relationship.
Yes.
And it leaves us to do a lot of the joining of the dots, i.e. Brute and Glob chopping up all the wood at the end. We don't have to have had that spelled out for us now, because we know that they've probably been sent to do it by Sandman.
Yeah.
We don't need to have that spelled out. The implication is kind of there.
I mean, Brute's in one panel, Glob's in a second panel, and then they're both in the last panel. That's it.
Yeah.
Really. So they're hardly in it at all. Nothing explained about them at all.
Yeah. An easy day on set for the two of them. And Sandman doesn't... It's probably the least that Sandman appears in it, because he rocks up at the start, then we don't see him for a long, long time, and then this very hurried, maybe not hurried, but this very compact and concise is my word of the week, listeners, trip to this part of the dream dimension where they help the Queen get rescued from the frogmen.
Mm-hmm.
I think the title's a bit of a misnomer. Well, it probably could have been Meet Jed's Auntie.
Mm-hmm. Well, either that, they'd have to call it Charles Dickens's The Sandman.
Yes, that's it exactly, yeah. And that's interesting as well, because even that relationship, as you said, as you alluded earlier on, the bullying cousin and stuff, that's all very familiar from other stuff. I really agree with you. I'm gutted that there's only one issue left after this, and I really could have done with another 3 or 4 just to see how things keep going, but...
I know.
Anyway.
I want to talk about a really nice effect in the artwork. The first panel of the last page, where you've got Sandman looking down at Jed, and you've got the celebrating crowd in the background.
Yes.
The colours of the crowd are kind of muted, and it gives it a whole soft focus, unreality to it, which is something you really don't see, especially comics of this age. It's a really smart way of phasing in and out of reality, bringing him out of the dream, back into the reality, or is that the dream and is that the reality?
Yeah,
it's really smart, and you never see that.
Now that Pete's mentioned it, we'll stick this panel on the socials on Facebook at least, so you can have a look at it, listeners. I mean, it is that sort of muted sort of sense that maybe things are dissolving, very pastel shades, and again, it reminds me. I can imagine this issue being an issue of the Game and Sandman drawn by someone in a Jack Kirby sort of style to kind of, almost as a kind of parody. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying here brings us to the point. Is this whole interlude with the Frogmen and the Queen and the Sandman, is it just a dream?
Could be.
Did Jed imagine this? Did it happen? But then, of course, we see Brute and Glob having chopped up the woodpile while he's been asleep.
But if it was a dream, Sandman might have seen Jed having this dream and thought, I better help out Jed, and sent Brute and Glob to help him.
Yeah, this is true.
So... Again, is it real? Is it not real? Who knows?
Or does all it take for Jed to, shall we say, cross over into the Sandman's realm? Does he just have to fall asleep? Is that all it takes?
Looks like it.
There's so much to this, and it's maddening that there's not that much more left.
well, maybe this new whistle of Jed's has got some more abilities. I mean, when he's in the dream stream, he's flying. He's breathing underwater. He seems to have almost super strength as he punches the frogmen.
Yeah, that's one of the points I was going to make, actually. The breathing underwater thing, that's another one that sort of suggests, could it all have just been a dream, or when he's in the dreamscape and stuff, does he have these extra powers? And it adds to that box of delights, Little Nemo in Slumberland, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, sort of fairy tale feel to this whole segment of the story. I think this is probably the best issue since the first one.
High praise indeed.
And I don't mean that to belittle any of the other ones, because I've enjoyed them a lot too, but this one, just for the pathos, for the emotional aspect of it, just for the almost casual way that this whole Frogmen thing is, they're only in 2 or 3 pages of the whole story. And that is a Defenders 39 cover, if ever there was one.
Yes.
I mentioned Alec there when last time I saw Alec the other week when he was in the shop. He asked me what I meant by Defenders 39. We had a copy of Defenders issue 39 in stock, so I was able to walk him through it and explain how that works. So listeners, anytime you're in the shop, come and give me a shout and I'll walk you through Defenders issue 39 and explain why the cover lies to us all. But anyway, I mean, the cover is sort of in a way, it's almost symbolic, the way that Jed is in the real world and she's obviously in the Queen's obviously in a sort of dream sort of realm, and he's trying to, is he being drawn in by holding on, or is he trying to pull her out? And Sandman is kind of there at all. It's very, very clever, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, the way the soap opera is in it, that's underselling it, because it's drama. It's not soap, it's drama.
It's heartbreaking.
Reading it when Grandpa died, and Sandman saying, I'm sorry, Jed, I couldn't do anything. I was like, oh, are they going to bring him back at the end? And then it's like, here's the evil auntie and uncle. And I love the way the uncle was basically pretty much monosyllabic. He's like, yeah. And auntie's the front of the two.
Yes.
It's a kind of believable trope, if you know what I mean, for that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very familiar. And I can imagine her being played by the lady that played Morticia Addams in the 2 Addams Family movies. She was in The Witches.
Oh, Angelica Houston.
Yes, I can. Yeah. Can you see that? I can imagine her being played by Angelica Houston.
Or Lilith from Fraser.
Yeah, and the uncle being played by Johnny Depp under lots of makeup, under a prosthetic. You know, I mean, this is definitely the most Tim Burton feeling issue of this series we've had so far. Oh my goodness, Tim Burton's Jack Kirby's The Sandman. Can you imagine?
I would not thank you for that.
Would you not?
No. Tim Burton's made 2 good movies.
Really? Interesting. Oh, fascinating. Brandon did a big Tim Burton retrospective on his show a couple of years ago. Listeners, our pal Brandon Peters. So if you're a Tim Burton fan or remotely interested, you go and check them out. Brandon and Scott have a big old chat about the entirety of Tim Burton's work up to Wednesday, and it's very, very interesting. Did it over a few episodes. It's very, very interesting. I would disagree with you. I think he certainly reached a point where diminishing returns, I think is probably a fair way to put it, but I would say I would personally think there's more than 2 good films, but we'll save that for another day.
Can you guess which 2 I'm referring to?
Probably Edward Scissorhands and Batman.
Nope.
Batman and Batman Returns.
Nope.
Batman and Sleepy Hollow.
Shall I put you out your misery?
Yes.
Okay. Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Never seen it.
Oh, it's amazing.
Right.
And, of course, Ed Wood.
Ah, okay. Right, because my favourite Burton movies are probably Big Fish and Sleepy Hollow.
Okay.
But there you go. That's the right. Listeners, what's your favourite Tim Burton movie? Write in and let us know. Speaking of writing in and let us know, I almost forgot. We recently did an episode for an old issue of Batman where Batman and Robin met the winged bat people. And there was a comment on Instagram from one of the friends of the show that I quickly want to highlight. Our good pal, Brian Schufel. Brian, if you're listening, hello. Brian commented on one of the posts on Instagram. I think it was the one where we'd shared the panels from the story. And Brian, in a very Brian style, asked us, I hope there were some winged Robin people or man Robin stories coming up. Brian, maybe when you write your own DC comic, you can write some stories with them. Or maybe when Tim Burton makes a movie based on this series, they'll turn up. So yes, thanks Brian for that. That gave me a laugh when I read it during the time difference. This is the one that feels like it's most, the ethos of it, the essence of it, has been sort of grasped by other media.
Yes. I can absolutely see where you're going with that, yeah.
You know, tragic orphan, rehomed, bad stuff, bad family, but has a special friend that gets him out of it, sort of stuff. You know, it's definitely familiar.
Yeah. Going back to the kind of reality of it, I wonder how Jed was surviving on the island himself. Were there shipments of food coming from somewhere? How was he paying for anything?
Well, he was probably catching fish, and there was probably vegetables growing on the island and stuff, I'm sure. We saw that he was quite capable with his nets. When you see him digging there, he was probably digging up
potatoes or something.
Or something, yeah. You know, he's maybe digs a hole to catch, you know, shrimps in or whatever. I don't know. I'm not an expert. That's a good point, and it really brings home what we've said in the past about social services and Jed.
But Jed must have some amazing skills that his grandpa taught him then, in that case.
I would say so, yeah.
But yeah, interesting.
Interesting things of note. Yes, very much so.
It is a shame that there's no letters for this, because I really would have loved to have heard other people's reactions, contemporary reactions from the time.
Yeah.
As to this huge change in the whole setup of Sandman. It's amazing. It's
going to be very interesting to see what happens in issue 6, to see if the family, I haven't read ahead, to see if the family turn up. And listeners, as we all know, there was an unpublished story for issue 7 which cropped up eventually, and it's a Christmas story, so I'm trying to persuade Peter that we do it as a Christmas episode this year, so there might be a gap between 6 and unpublished. I think it turns up in one of the Best of DC digests or something like that, and I think it's in Cancelled Comics Cavalcade. That will probably happen at some point in the future.
We'll track it down, yes.
Yes, we will. This series really has been a joy. I think Michael Fleischer and Jack Kirby make a really good team.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Michael really writes for Jack's strengths, or Jack is able to interpret what Mike's sort of suggesting. There's a real synergy. It works really, really well. And you're so right. I mean, I wish this had gone for 60 issues.
Yeah.
Jack was probably already on his way back to Marvel for Captain America and Machine Man and all that stuff by this point. So it's a shame, but it really is really, really special. And I'm so glad that we decided to do these and not just do an episode where we did summaries of each of them, or even just said, and there were 5 other issues, you can track them down, and, you know, next week, Jimmy Olsen, you know, that sort of thing. I'm so glad that we've done them all.
Yeah, me too. Listeners, are you glad we've done them all? You could write to us, but don't write to us. Instead, write to DC and demand a collection of this series.
Yes.
A deluxe format collection of this series would be incredible.
It would.
But if you don't want to do that, you can write to us. We're at the earth2podcast@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on social media, because we're putting up some lovely bonus material for this and indeed every episode. On Facebook and Instagram, we're at the Earth2 Podcast, and on Twitter, We're at podcast_Earth2, and it is the number 2 for all of our socials.
Yes, we haven't mentioned the speak pipe for a while, have we?
Now that we have, there's a link in the show notes. If you want to send us a voice message, you can, and we might even play it on the show.
Of course we will. That'd be lovely. That'd be nice. Give us your thoughts on the Kirby Sandman and all that sort of stuff and everything. Yes, as I always say at this point, if you're enjoying the show, spread the word, tell your pals. You can go to wherever you receive your podcasts and give us a positive review. That'd be lovely. And as I always say, also, if you're feeling generous, you could find our link tree and find our coffee page and buy Peter the price of a beverage to make up for all the work he had to do in the Fantastic Four and Justice League episodes and all the work he's going to do on the JS April episodes, which we're going to have to start recording. But recording has started.
It has, yes.
On our JS April episodes. Brandon has already sent us his lines for a character he's voicing. So stay tuned for that. Shall we play the JS April trailer again, Peter?
Yes, let's hear more about JS April from Shag. Over to you.
Back in 1940, 8 sensational heroes united to create the world's very first superhero team, the Justice Society of America. Now, 85 years later, we're gathering podcasters and bloggers from around the globe for a month-long celebration in an event we're calling JS April. Throughout April 2025, join dozens of content creators as they each share their own unique tributes to the original and greatest superhero team, including all-star podcasters and bloggers like
Justice Society presents
the Longbox Crusade podcast,
Campus Comics Cast,
Supergirl Comic Box Commentary,
the Quarter Bin podcast,
The Bat Pod,
the Earth 2 podcast,
FW Team Up,
Diana Prince is the new Wonder Woman,
Fanholes podcast,
Back to the Bins,
Coffee and Comics,
the Huntress podcast,
*51.blogspot.com,
Justice Society Origins, a part of John Reed's Comics,
DC Specialcast,
Between the Pages blog,
The Outcasters, a Batman and the Outsiders podcast,
A World on Fire, an All-Star Squadron podcast,
JLA Stories and Friends,
The Monitor Tapes,
a Crisis on Infinite Earths podcast,
Lords of Order, a DC's Dr. Fate fan podcast,
David M. Gallagher at Medium.com,
JSA in the 90s,
Justice League Legacies,
DC Secret Files podcast,
Mike's Geek World,
Pop Culture Affidavit,
the Source Material Comics podcast,
That Giffen Show,
Worst Collection Ever,
The Fantastic Four.
It all comes back to Superman.
And that's just some of the podcasters and bloggers who'll be joining in the celebration. Get ready for a thrilling month of beloved characters, fascinating insights, and incredible stories. Follow the action on social media with the hashtag JSApril, and visit our website for a complete list of participating podcasters, bloggers, and what they're each covering at fireandwaterpodcast.com/JSApril.
And there we are. Yes, plenty to get your ears around in April, which isn't too far away by the time we release this one. We better get on with it and start recording, haven't we?
On that bombshell. I've been Peter.
And I've been David. Take care, folks. We'll see you soon on the Earth 2 podcast.
Transmatter Cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
We then see Uncle Barnaby puffing a smoke ring via his cigar. What?
All right, Uncle Reese. I'll come. Just let me have some time to...
What am I doing there?
You tell me.
I'm totally saying, don't do it, boy. Don't do it.
I know. Don't do it. I agree with you, Jed. Don't do it.